Hey everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and welcome to a video I love to make every single year at the beginning of the year. This is not the first video releasing this year because earlier today I finally did my New York Film Fest wrap-up ranking as kind of like a best of the fest list to end the year of 2024 before I move on to the year of 2025. Now, a lot of people are asking, what were your best films of 2024? And you can find some of those films in the ranking I did today for New York Film Fest, but you can also find them in the Pickle Awards, which will be happening next month, where I will honor the best of 2024. There's still a lot of stuff to deal with for 2024 in terms of a final review I need to do for Gladiator and Wicked. I know people are waiting for it. I also need to do some Oscar videos, Oscar wrap-ups and rankings, and everything to do with the Oscars. So 2024 is not done. We are not done talking about the films of 2024. We won't be until the very beginning of March when the Oscars are all said and done. But it is important to start looking ahead to 2025 because these films are going to be starting to come out before we know it. And it's always so fun to look ahead at all the films coming out this year because there are still several films we don't know if they are coming out this year, if they're going to be pushed, delayed. There are some films that are coming out but don't have release dates, some films that are merely speculated to come out that may not just formulate at all. It might just be coming out in 2026 or 7 or 8, but it is fun nonetheless to look ahead and see what we have coming up the wazoo because there are a big amount of big films coming out that I'm so excited for. Films that are smaller, but by big directors and big stars, and then big blockbuster films as well that I'm very excited for. I think this is going to be a big year for blockbusters, whether it be good or bad blockbusters, but blockbusters nonetheless, where we are getting some major studio releases, some revamps of old properties like Snow White and Fantastic Four, but also some very big notable ones that people are excited, some remakes as well. So much to talk about. So let's get into it. How I do my most anticipated videos is I take every single month, I look at the month individually and pick my favorite or most anticipated movie from that month. And then at the very end, I add 3 more that don't have release dates to the list. And then I compile that 15 and then I will rank them. So I'm not just going to pick my top 15 most anticipated, but I'm going to go by month just because I want to give some representation to all the films that are going to be coming out this year. So not just 12 summer blockbusters, not just 12 Oscar bait films, but I also want to give some love to some of the smaller films that might be coming out at the beginning of the year, and also just shedding light on every single month of film that will be offered in the year of 2025. It's my own way of doing it. It makes it a little bit more unique, and it's one I stand by. So let's get it started. Kicking things off with January. Not a ton of releases in January, but some fun ones. On the 17th, we're getting a Keke Palmer SZA double feature. One of them Days. Both of them are in it. Keke Palmer, an established actress at this point. SZA, a very new actress. She is a singer first and foremost, so it's going to be really cool to see how she makes that leap to film. The trailers look promising. What other trailers look promising? Obviously, Presence, the new Steven Soderbergh film, also coming out on the 17th. Fun fact about this film was almost filmed in my house. The location scout did come to my house to look at it as a potential house to use in the movie because Steven Soderbergh, this film all takes place in a single house. It is a ghost story. I'm kind of glad my house didn't get chosen, though, because I will say with a horror movie, seeing your own living environment in a horror scenario, it's going to make it a lot less easy to actually live there and sleep there. I might have to flee to Canada if I were to ever see my house in a horror film, because I don't think I'd be able to sleep in these walls under this roof. So I'm actually it's a blessing in disguise that I did not get selected, or my house didn't get selected to be in the movie Presence, but I'm still excited for it. I mean, Steven Soderbergh is the man. His films as of late have been very small and much more low budget, very experimental, and I'm really excited about that aspect of it. I like that he's kind of stretching his different limits and trying to figure out new ways to innovate with the craft, and I think Presence is going to be another one of his that does so. Also on the 31st, we have Companion. This is another trailer that gives pretty much nothing, but it is intriguing nonetheless. This is the same production team that made Barbarian. Zach Kreger is behind this. He's not directing it, but he is producing it, and if any film puts Barbarian from the studio that brought you Barbarian in the trailer, it's going to be one that piques my interest. This is a film that my family and I watch often because we've kind of made it a meme in our household. Whenever we say the word baby, we say "Bah, bah." I mean, that is just what Barbarian has become in our household. It's that weird thing that we all kind of clung onto as this little niche favorite of the Randazzo household. So I'm very excited for Companion. I know little to nothing about it. Again, these trailers are doing a good job not letting on too much. But there is one horror film that kind of trumps them all in terms of the one I'm most excited for on the 17th of January. It's one that was on my most anticipated film list last year. I thought it was going to get an October release. It didn't. It got pushed a few months, and it is Lee Whannell's Wolfman. Now, this should be no surprise coming from someone who put The Invisible Man as his top film of 2020. It is a film that has stuck with me still. It is the last film I saw in theaters before COVID, so there is that kind of sentimental bond, as like that was my last theater going experience for a whole year, and it really just stuck out vividly in my imagination, in my mind. But also, it was just such a great film. It was so well executed. There was great social commentary, great themes about domestic abuse and women and feminism, that I think is going to be really fascinating to see how Lee Whannell interprets the Wolfman with those similar, not necessarily similar themes, but similar ideas of trying to make some sort of commentary or having some extra layering to say that just sets it apart from any generic Wolfman story. Now, it could be a very generic Wolfman story. I don't know. The trailers are selling it as a little bit more elevated than just your single, like, very stereotypical studio horror flick. But at the same time, there is that danger that it is coming out in January. Maybe the studio doesn't have as much confidence in it. But I think just having Lee Whannell behind it, having the cast of Julia Garner and Christopher Abbott, I mean, this is the second big release to come out this year. So yes, I did not put Den of Thieves 2 on my list. I haven't seen the first one, but this is a film I'm very, very hopeful with. And even if it's not as good as The Invisible Man, not many films will probably end up being as good as that film, because that film I think is perfect. I think this is still going to be a really fun treat to start off the year. So it is my most anticipated of January. Moving on to February, it is the month of love, and according to Ke Huy Quan, love hurts on February 7th. Ke Huy Quan getting a lot of good vehicles post-Oscar win, and this is going to be his probably biggest starring role since his Oscar win, which is going to be really exciting. He is kind of taking on the mantle as this like action hero, but it's also a bit of a rom-com, I believe. Again, I'm trying not to read too much into some of these trailers, especially the ones that I don't see at every single movie, to kind of keep some of that magic in that bottle for me to experience when I'm actually at the film. But Ke Huy Quan can't go wrong. On the 14th, we have, of course, Captain America Brave New World, the newest MCU film, which normally people would expect is going to be on my list, but there is just one film that is undeniable in this month that I'm excited for. Otherwise, I would have probably considered it, because I do think the trailers have actually been pretty good. I like the espionage vibe of it. It kind of harkens back to an old MCU that we haven't seen in a while, though I didn't like Secret Invasion, and that was also espionage focused. So I don't know. I don't love the Red Hulk of it all, but again, I think in the context of the movie, it'll work a little bit better. I do love Sam Wilson as Captain America. I love the whole route and approach they're taking to having this black man hold the shield, this mantle, and what it has to say about society. I'm really fascinated for it. I really like the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, so I'm really hoping this is really good, but again, not quite my pick for February. On the 21st, we have The Monkey. This is the second film in like 5 months from Osgood Perkins, who just gave us Long Legs. So clearly he's cranking out so many great films, or at least films that he's very passionate about, because he's releasing this very soon after Long Legs. But I think this is because Long Legs was such a hit, they wanted to get this next one out there. They wanted people to see it, especially in a smaller market like February, where we're not getting a ton of huge films. I mean, there's a big MCU film coming out, but not a ton of huge, big blockbuster films. So this could be a part of the year where a horror film like this works. It's based on a Stephen King short story. The trailers look great. Again, this would have been in contention if there were not a sweet little British bear from Peru amongst the list. And that is why my most anticipated for the 14th of February, for the month of February, is Paddington in Peru. I mean, this was a no-brainer. As soon as I found out this was coming out in February, this was my most anticipated film of February. It is because Paddington has kind of become my spirit animal. It's the person, or the bear, I should say, but the character that most people kind of associate me with, even though I do think I could never be as good as Paddington. No one could ever be as good as Paddington. But I am very humbled when people say that I even resemble any bearing resemblance to him. But yeah, I'm very excited to watch the next adventure for this little bear. I don't think it's going to be quite as good as Paddington 2. Again, kind of like I was saying with Wolfman and The Invisible Man, like there's no way anything, no film, is going to be better than Paddington 2. Very few are. I only have like 5 films in the history of film ranked above Paddington 2. So this is a big, daunting, hefty task to follow in the shoes. But if this film is a fraction, a quarter, a millisecond of the quality of the second Paddington film, then we're in for a treat. It's still going to be delightful. I just don't know if it's going to hit those emotional highs that the last one did. But not every film has to, especially the third in a franchise. I am not going to hold that against Paddington in Peru. I'm very excited for it. Every time the trailer comes on, I put down my popcorn and I watch it, because that is a trailer I want to soak in, because I love Paddington. I just love that franchise, and I'm very excited for that film to come out in February, in just a little over a month. I cannot wait.
It's called a hard stare. fire, Mr. Hunter. And it's for when people have forgotten their manners.
In March, we have a lot of great films that are a little bit more under the radar because they aren't attached to any big IPs. There is obviously one big IP-driven film, that being Snow White. I'm not necessarily over the moon excited for it, though I am intrigued by it. I do think Rachel Zegler is one of a very few amount of generational talents working today, an incredible talent. But not quite my pick here for most anticipated of March. I do think Ephus looks intriguing. It's a movie about baseball. It comes out on the 7th. This is a film that I wanted to see at New York Film Festival. I was between seeing this film or visiting the Criterion Closet, and I figured, you know what? One of those is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The other is a opportunity I could get again on March 7th, and that is what I will be doing when I see Ephus, which looks really, really good. It looks heartwarming. It is a baseball movie. It got great reviews out of New York Film Festival and the other festivals it played in. On the 14th, we have another Steven Soderbergh movie, his second in 3 months. Black Bag looks really good. Also, Novocaine, not a Steven Soderbergh movie, but another movie starring companion star Jack Quaid. This is a really cool premise. I really love the trailers for Novocaine, where like this guy can't experience pain, but he can die. So it kind of creates a cool amount of stakes in this action movie. It also allows for really cool action sequences. In the trailer, he like sticks his hand into a whole grease pan and like a whole what do you call it, basket of grease. I don't know the word for it. A fryer, a deep fryer, there we go. He sticks his hand in a deep fryer, and that's all I remember from the trailer, but it really intrigued me nonetheless. I think they're going to do some cool makeup things with that film as well. On the 21st, we're getting Alto Nights, which is the new Barry Levinson film starring Robert De Niro and Robert De Niro. He's playing two mob bosses. I mean, if one mob boss, Robert De Niro, wasn't intriguing, now you have two. And I think Robert De Niro is also one of those talents who just exceeds time and space and is just one of the most talented people of any era of his filmmaking career. So yeah, very excited for Alto Nights. I actually think I might want to see that more than Snow White, which comes out on that very day. I might be one of the few who actually buys his ticket for the other film that day. But the film I'm most excited for comes out on March 7th. It's a film that was also in contention for my most anticipated last year. It has finally made my list this year, probably because it's a little shallower at the beginning of the year than it would have been at the end of last year, and that is Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17. This is another film I don't know anything about, and I'm purposefully doing that because Bong Joon-ho's last film, Parasite, was a film I went into completely blind, didn't know anything about it, and was totally captivated. I mean, that year, 2019, has my favorite film from Tarantino, my favorite film from Scorsese, and yet Bong Joon-ho's Parasite is still my favorite film of that year. It just goes to show how stacked that year is, but also how great Bong Joon-ho is, and I think his follow-up to Parasite is something everyone should be excited for. I mean, the fact that this guy just walked away with 3 Oscars, you know, kind of hid back a little bit and now came out guns blazing, Mickey 17, cool black comedy sci-fi premise starring Robert Pattinson. I think we should all be head over heels excited for it. At least I am. I don't know anything about it, and I'm trying to keep myself out of the loop on it because I want to be in the dark, because I think that is the most effective way to experience any film, but especially a film by Bong Joon-ho. So I'm very excited for director Bong's Mickey 17.
Why aren't you dead?
Moving on to April. Speaking of April 17th, my birthday, my most anticipated film, though, takes place a day after April 17th. I consider the Minecraft movie. I think the trailer has a lot of good meme value, but I did not pick it. Also, The Accountant 2 is coming out in April, but there's really only one release in April that I'm excited for, and that is Ryan Coogler's Sinners. This is a film that is tailor-made for me because it is tailor-made for the big, bold IMAX experience. They're really hyping up the IMAX release of this thing. It was filmed with IMAX cameras. It's Ryan Coogler returning with Michael B. Jordan. Again, like Robert De Niro in Alto Nights, Michael B. Jordan is going to be playing 2 roles in this thing, 2 lead roles. Haley Steinfeld is also in this film. If you know me, you know she is my #1 celebrity crush. I will crush you, Josh Allen. Just kidding. Congratulations on your engagement. I only cried about it for a few hours. But Haley Steinfeld is my celebrity crush, so it's really exciting to see her in this film as well. I don't know anything about this film either. I mean, it's a consistent trend that for these original films that aren't based on anything, that they're original concepts, I don't want to know much because I want to be surprised. I want to go into it just having seen the trailer, and the trailer doesn't give away a lot, which is really cool. But apparently it's a horror film, and I get a little bit of that vibe from the trailer, but it also gives me some gritty action moments as well. I mean, Michael B. Jordan looks ripped in it, and there's guns, and it's a very fiery trailer. So I'm very excited. The trailer is just so good, and just I love the idea that Ryan Coogler's going back to original filmmaking. Not to say that Creed wasn't fantastic. I like Black Panther. I think Black Panther Wakanda Forever is fine, but I really do like that he's going back to an original story. This is his first fully original film since Fruitvale Station, and I think, you know, seeing how much he's evolved as a technical filmmaker to now kind of go back to his roots of creating these original, authentic, really powerful stories, but now using the technical sensibilities. I mean, there are very few directors that are as exciting right now as Ryan Coogler. One of them that comes to mind is like Jordan Peele, Greta Gerwig, these names that have now become real staples of this modern generation of filmmaking. And I think Ryan Coogler is definitely one of them. And I think just seeing him create this big blockbuster spectacle horror film event on April 18th, the day after my birthday. I mean, like, sign me up. Like, if I can get to an IMAX theater, I will be there day one, night one, sitting there with my popcorn in hand, ready to take in whatever is going to be thrown at me. And I'm very excited, though I am scared because I hate horror films because they scare me, but I love them also because they thrill me. So that is my pick for April. Moving on to May. May also has an MCU joint as part of the mix. On the second, we're getting the Thunderbolts. Again, it's hard for me to get super excited about MCU considering I haven't been hyped about an MCU project since Guardians 3, and I don't really count X-Men 97 because that's animated and it's kind of in its own lane, its own zone. But otherwise, I've been a little underwhelmed by the MCU. I thought Agatha All Along was fine. I didn't like Deadpool and Wolverine, so I think this is going to be an interesting year for MCU. I think this is going to be the year where MCU can finally get me back in their good graces, but right now I'm still teetering a little bit. I'm still like, you know what? I'm excited to see it, but I'm not losing my mind like I was when Avengers Endgame came out, where I was in the front row like, oh my God, give it to me, cinema. I'm not like that right now. If this were in 2019, I'd probably be losing my mind about the idea of a Thunderbolts team up with David Harbour and Florence Pugh and Sebastian Stan and, all those characters. But right now I'm just kind of like, okay, yeah, I'm excited for it. But that's not to take away from it. I think it's going to be fun. On the 9th, we're getting 2 films that are not based on IPs. We have a big, bold, beautiful Journey, which is the newest film by Kogonada, who did Columbus. He also did the film, what's it called, After Yang. He's actually reteaming with Colin Farrell in this one. I don't know much about it, but I do know that it is going to be a pretty sizable jump forward in quality and release. It's being produced by TriStar. It's got Margot Robbie in the mix as well. So I hope this is another step up for Kogonada becoming more of a household name, because I think he's a really great director. Also, a household name for me is Michel Gondry, who directed my second favorite film of all time, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and he's back with a film called Golden. I don't know much of what it's about. Again, I'm not trying to look too far into these premises too much, but it does star a great cast, including Kelvin Harrison Jr., Halle Bailey, Divine Joy Randolph, fresh off that Oscar win, Brian Tyree Henry, Quinta Brunson, Janelle Monáe, Tim Meadows, Anderson Paak, Missy Elliott. I mean, there's so many great talents in this film that I'm very, very, very excited for. And just the fact that Michel Gondry's back. I mean, I love his films. Eternal Sunshine, as I said, is a very sentimental, deep, personal, lovely film for me. So I'm excited to see any Michel Gondry film, let alone one with a cast as stacked as this. On the 23rd, we are getting Lilo and Stitch, the live action remake, even though Stitch is still animated and he's been the only part of the marketing so far. So as far as I know, it's just another animated film. But no, I'm really excited for this one, especially because Dean Fleischer Camp is behind it. He did Marcel the Shell, and I really love that film. And I think Lilo and Stitch is one that I do think the story itself is so strong. But I also find that there can be some elements of it that you could change maybe to make it a little bit fresher, a little newer, but at the same time, it might be a little too soon to remake it. So I'm not putting it on my list, but I am excited for it. I love Stitch, so I'm very excited to see him kind of grace the screen in his new CGI'd self, even though, it is still just an animated Stitch at the end of the day. On the 30th, we have the Karate Kid Legends. This is going to be kind of a hybrid of the Ralph Macchio Karate Kid universe and the Jackie Chan Karate Kid film from 2010. The Karate Kid 2010 film was actually the first film I ever went on a date to. I went with my 6th grade girlfriend, and our friend sat in the middle of the two of us. So a very memorable date that I still remember to this day. I still look back on and laugh. Speaking of life, The Life of Chuck on the 30th, a film that would on any other month be on my list. It just so happens that there's another film from one of my favorite franchises coming out in May. But The Life of Chuck is a film I'm very excited for. I love Tom Hiddleston. I love Mark Hamill, but especially Mike Flanagan. Mike Flanagan is the guy who does all the horror stuff on Netflix. He's now kind of broken free from Netflix a little bit. He's kind of flying solo on his own. And this film, Life of Chuck, won the TIFF Audience Award at TIFF, the Toronto International Film Festival, which means there's a very, very good chance that it will get nominated for Best Picture, because no TIFF film that has won has missed since like 2012, I think it was. So very good track record for that TIFF stat. So there's a good chance we will be talking about Mike Flanagan come Oscar time next year. And I just think that's such a cool, interesting prospect. The idea that Mike Flanagan might become an Oscar contender or Oscar winner, because a lot of the times we also see the TIFF Audience Award winners win screenplay. We saw it with American Fiction. So I really, really like this prospect of Mike Flanagan being an Oscar darling. But only time will tell. I actually honestly hope they push it a little further so it does have a real good statement to make, maybe at the end of the summer, to really just take awards season and kick it off with a high start. I do think releasing it at the end of May with all these other big blockbusters, I really hope it doesn't get lost, but I do know I have trust in Neon that it will get out to the right audience, and I cannot wait to be part of that audience. But my most anticipated for May should be no surprise if you know me. It's on the 23rd. It's Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. I will always show up for these movies. I love these movies. There's only one of these movies I don't like, and it's surprisingly the John Woo one, and even then, because it's John Woo, there's still a few things that I love about it. So I love this franchise. This is one that just keeps getting better and better and better. I don't think Dead Reckoning was quite as strong as Fallout was, but it doesn't matter because Fallout is a masterpiece, and I don't think anything can top Fallout. But I did think Dead Reckoning was really solid, and I think The Final Reckoning is going to be a great ending to this arc. I don't know if it is the ending of the endings to end all endings for Mission Impossible. I do think Tom Cruise still wants to keep going, but if for some reason this is the end, if we do get a surprising send-off for Ethan Hunt, I think it will be a fulfilling one because they've been doing everything right up till this point, especially with the AI commentary and the technology taking over commentary that is kind of has been seeping through the cracks of this franchise. I think it's a really cool direction they're going in. So I cannot wait to see how they conclude at least this minor little story arc about Reckoning. But I also hope, if this is the end, that it is the best end possible for this franchise that has been quite possibly my favorite franchise, Impossible. I don't know. I'm just making wordplay up. I filmed 3 videos today.
I need you to trust me. One last time.
But moving on to June. Speaking of 3 videos, we got 3 pretty big studio releases. On the 13th, we're getting a big studio release from Pixar and from DreamWorks, except one is animated, one is live action. That's right. How to Train Your Dragon is a live action remake of a DreamWorks film. Oh, I almost had a bad Freudian slip there. How to Train Your Dragon. Surprising that is only taken 14, 15 years to remake this in live action. I think, normally for live action remakes, it takes at least 20. But hey, you know what? That is the biggest craze nowadays. At this point, I just have to accept it. I am not necessarily very excited for How to Train Your Dragon. I'm excited to listen to that score because I love that score, but I just don't know if it's too soon. I think it might be too soon. I just don't see the need, aside from money, to make this in live action. And I have heard that the director just wants to make it so that others can't. He's like, you know what, if you're remaking it, then I'll do it because I want it to be my thing. And I appreciate that, but I'm also just not quite sure if I think we need a How to Train Your Dragon remake this soon after the original has come out, and especially 6 years since the last film came out. It just feels all too soon. But what I am excited for is Elio on the 13th, same day. I don't know if that's going to change or not, but Pixar going up against DreamWorks, but this is going to be an original Pixar film. And I think if anything is going to prove the point that we want original films and not live action remakes of every single animated film that already does exist, I think Elio beating How to Train Your Dragon at the box office would be the coolest story, though I don't think it's going to happen. I think the IP is always going to take over, sadly, opposed to the original work. But still, Elio looks really cool, looks playful, looks imaginative. Pixar has been a little hit or miss for me lately, but I do think, an original story from Pixar just really piques my interest. So I'm really hoping it's great because a lot of their original stuff as of late, Turning Red and Luca, I've really liked. I didn't love Elemental, but I thought it was pretty fun. So I really hope Elio hits those heights. And then a studio horror film. We actually have 2 studio horror films. We have Megan 2.0 coming out on the 27th. I almost forgot about that one, but I just checked my list and it's there. We also have 28 Years Later, which is the sequel to 28 Weeks Later, which is the sequel to 28 Days Later. I've seen 28 Days Later, but it's been a while. I need to refresh my memory on it. Haven't seen 28 Weeks Later, so I can't necessarily say I'm most anticipating 28 Years Later, but the trailer looks really good. Speaking of really good trailers, the 27th has F1, which is the follow-up to Top Gun Maverick for Joseph Kosinski. We just talked about Tom Cruise for Mission Impossible. This one, if it sticks the landing in the way that Top Gun Maverick did, obviously I'm very excited about it. Brad Pitt, it's about racing. I like racing movies for the most part, especially especially car racing movies. I loved Ford v Ferrari. I liked Ferrari. So this could be really fun. I liked Gran Turismo. I just think something about car racing works in a cinematic language for me, especially with Joseph Kosinski attached. It's going to look great. But I don't think any of these films can truly stack up to my most anticipated film of June, which is Ballerina. On the 6th of June, it's actually going to be the earliest film to release in June. This is a spin-off of John Wick, and I really just love this idea because A, I love ballet dancing, B, I love Ana de Armas, and C, I love that they're not just trying to bring John Wick back and just keep trying to retread the same beats over and over again, because John Wick Chapter 4 was such a satisfying ending. I do have a suspicion that John Wick will show up in Ballerina, but it's going to be merely in a supporting role, at least I hope. If they try to just make it another John Wick film, I'm going to be upset, but I do think they understand that the power of this franchise is not just John Wick as a character, but just the action, the different set pieces, the different villains, the different intrigue, the spy nature of it, the different action sequences, the boldness and the rawness of those action sequences. And I think Ballerina really has that ability to be that type of film. Now, am I head over heels excited for it because it is still a spinoff of an IP? Maybe not, because I think we could just let John Wick rest. But if we are going to continue John Wick's story, I think this is the best way to do it, rather than making a John Wick 5, kind of go toward a spinoff route, maybe have John Wick show up for one or two scenes, but really make it its own thing. And I really like that because I love this universe, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun watching them play in this universe. I love John Wick Chapter 4 so much that I couldn't ignore this one. I mean, the fact that we're getting Mission Impossible and John Wick back to back, sign me up. I'm very excited.
What a pleasure to see you again.
Moving on to July, another big month for big franchises. I mean, Jurassic World Rebirth on July 2nd. I can't say I'm super excited for it, only because the last few have been a little disappointing. On the 18th, we have another I Know What You Did Last Summer reboot with some of the original cast returning. Very fun. On the 25th, another MCU film, The Fantastic Four First Steps. This was one that I actually thought was pretty close to making my list. I think of all the MCU films, this is the one I'm most excited for, only because it feels like the freshest new kind of interpretation of material. And we haven't gotten a Fantastic Four film right. We got The Incredibles, but that wasn't an official Fantastic Four film. So if they can nail it here, I'm going to be so thrilled and so relieved. But until then, I do have to hold my breath a bit. We also have an original Matt Stone, Trey Parker musical comedy coming out on the 4th of July on Independence Day. So who knows? Maybe it'll be Americana themed. It also stars Kendrick Lamar and Chloe East. I don't know. It's very intriguing, but sign me up. I'm excited for it. But my most anticipated film of July should be no surprise. I assume it's most people's most anticipated film of the year, and that is the DCEU or DCU's kickoff, whatever it is. It's James Gunn's Superman. This is going to be the film that kind of sets this new DC universe forward. I do believe it is the DCU. I think the DCEU is what it was. Now it's the DCU. I get so confused also because I call the Disney Channel universe the DCU. So what do I do now? Because that's so Hannah Montana, Sweet Life, that combination, that was the DCEU for me. That was the DC universe, the Disney Channel universe. But now there's DC Comics, but DC Comics is DCC. So DCU, DCEU. Anyway, I'm confusing myself. Superman looks great. You all saw the trailer. I saw the trailer. We all love the trailer. I love the trailer. I think it's going to be great. The only thing I'm nervous about is that they are putting so much stake into it. Obviously, this is going to be what this new universe of DC hinges upon. This is quite literally going to be sink or swim for the studio, because if it fails, they don't have a future. I think this is going to show that James Gunn has what it takes to run this studio, run this franchise, and build it up to the successes that Marvel has. I mean, they obviously brought James Gunn into the fold because they believed that he could bring that greatness that was missing in the last DCEU. And I do think that DCEU had some good, promising notes to it. I did think Zack Snyder's Justice League was very, very good. I thought Birds of Prey was a lot of fun. I don't know where the Joaquin Phoenix Joker films fit into there, but I know they're crowd favorites, even though they're not a favorite of mine. I shouldn't say that about both films because everyone hated the second film, but that first film created a lot of buzz. But I think, honestly, James Gunn just needs to start fresh, and that's what this trailer felt like. It felt like a fresh new start for Superman. A lot of good, vivid color. There were some sequences in the actual workplace which seemed a little bit muddled. It almost had that The Boys aesthetic, but I think some of the big action beats that were shown in the trailer were so vivid. I mean, the stuff of the super dog kind of dragging Superman through the snow, I mean, that is the vibe that James Gunn is going to have here. It's going to be playful, it's going to be a little amateurish, but in a fun, endearing way. He wants to make it feel a little bit younger, and I like that because then it gives a place to grow. I hate when these franchises start where the main character is very old. Start it when they're young to give us room to go. Like I I thought that was the great choice with Tom Holland as Spider-Man, is you were casting him really young so that 10 years from now he's a fully formed adult, and now the character's fully formed. And I think the same thing is happening here. I think David Cornsweet looks great in the role. I think he's going to be great. Rachel Brosnahan, I cannot wait for her as Lois Lane. She's going to be fantastic. So yes, I know Fantastic Four is going to be the talk of a lot of people's hubbub in July, but I think Superman's going to be the one that just has the edge. I don't know. I just have faith. I have faith that James Gunn's going to deliver, though I am nervous. I am nervous. It's not going to be my number one most anticipated of the year because I'm a little nervous, just because I know there is potential, if this fails, that DC is really, truly doomed, because they are putting a lot of stock into it.
Crypto. Home. Take me home.
August is a little bit lighter than July is. On the first, we kick it off with The Bad Guys 2. I didn't love The Bad Guys 1, so I'm not particularly excited about the second one. We also have the Naked Gun remake starring Liam Neeson, also written by the Lonely Island guys and Seth MacFarlane. I think the talent behind it makes me excited for it. I love Ted. I love Seth MacFarlane. I love the Lonely Island. So I think this is going to be good. I think if you're going to retread any sort of IP, this is what you do. You make another Naked Gun with another star of now who's a little bit past his prime, like Liam Neeson. I think that's a much cooler idea than like going back and making a DreamWorks film and redoing it in live action 15 years later. Not to throw any more shade on How to Train Your Dragon, but I did just talk about DreamWorks with The Bad Guys too, so they're fresh on the mind. But yeah, I think this is a cooler approach. Remake something like The Naked Gun, which we haven't really talked about as a society for a while, even though I've never seen those films. Maybe I should go back and watch them and I'll be even more excited. Also retreading something old, Freakier Friday. It's the legacy sequel of the remake of Freaky Friday, which is going to be really interesting. Jamie Lee Curtis is back, so is Lindsay Lohan. So I'm very excited for that. I actually am very excited. I think Hocus Pocus 2, Disenchanted, they weren't my favorite films, but it was cool to like revisit those characters once again. And I think Freakier Friday, because it's a little less fantastical than Hocus Pocus and Enchanted, I think it's going to be a little bit more of a solid, sturdy legacy sequel. Again, we've been seeing so many sequels and retreads and remakes, but I think something like Freakier Friday is a little fresher because we haven't seen Lindsay Lohan in the mainstream in quite a while. She's done a few Netflix films. Jamie Lee Curtis just won an Oscar, so at least there's a little more intrigue there. That makes me a little bit more excited for Freakier Friday than some other films that are getting their third or fourth iterations or remakes or all those laundry list of different IP-driven things. I think Freakier Friday is one of the more intriguing prospects. Also on the 15th, Nobody 2. This was a film, Nobody, that came out of nowhere and was a really great action hit starring Bob Odenkirk. I'm really excited to see what the second one brings. But my most anticipated film for August is not an IP film. It is an original film by Paul Thomas Anderson, and that is The Ballad of Bacton Cross. I don't know how you pronounce it. Bacton Cross. I don't know. Probably not going to be the title when it comes to the theaters because all his titles change. I mean, Licorice Pizza used to be known as Soggy Bottoms, so there's the fact that The Ballad of Bacton Cross is not going to be the actual title when we see it in the theater. But I'm just going to read through the cast list that Paul Thomas Anderson has assembled for this film. Leonardo DiCaprio, Regina Hall, Sean Penn, Alana Haim, Tiana Taylor, Benicio del Toro. I mean, this list, Johnny Greenwood is doing the score for it. I mean, this is going to be a great film. I have no doubts. I mean, Paul Thomas Anderson always delivers. There's not a film of his that I can think of that I don't like, at least. There are some films that are very challenging and hard to grasp on first watch, like Inherent Vice and The Master, but I'm always intrigued by his films. I always find them very, very meaningful in some way, especially to the craft of cinema. So I'm just so excited to see Leonardo DiCaprio in a Paul Thomas Anderson film. It's sure to be a lot of fun. In September, there's only really two titles that I considered for September. They are both actually, believe it or not, horror films. One being Saw 11, I believe. Saw XI? Yeah, that's 11. Saw 11, I like Saw 10, but I don't love it enough to put Saw 11 as my pick for that month. Also because I picked Spiral in this point a few years ago because it was one of the only releases coming out in August, I believe, the year it came out, and it was awful. So I'm not going to take another gamble on Saw. I did like Saw X, but not enough to put Saw 11 on my list. But coming out the same day, on the 26th, is another horror film directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and that is The Bride, which is actually going to be, I believe, a horror musical interpretation of the Bride of Frankenstein story, starring Jessie Buckley, Christian Bale, Penelope Cruz, Peter Sarsgaard, Annette Bening, Julianne Hough, and Jake Gyllenhaal. I mean, that cast, holy crap. I really liked Maggie Gyllenhaal's first directorial feature, The Lost Daughter. I think it was good, not amazing, but I think this one really has the capability of being a real shocker, a real surprise, something that gets a lot of people talking. I mean, just the sheer concept of doing a musical version of a horror remake of The Bride of Frankenstein, calling it The Bride with a big exclamation point. I'm very excited. The thing is, I don't know a ton about it. I haven't seen any footage from it, but just knowing that like Christian Bale is going to be in a horror musical directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, also starring her brother Jake, with Jesse Buckley in the lead, like this is going to be a great film. I have no doubts about it. And if it's not a great film, it would be one of the surprises of September, because I would be shocked if this is not at the end of the year one of the films that I'm at least talking about as one of the best of the year. In October, though, speaking of the month of horror, I actually didn't have a lot of horror films on this list. I did put Black Phone 2 on the list. I don't really know how you follow up that movie unless you do a whole spinoff, but it does have a lot of the same cast. So I don't know. I'm not really that excited about it. Also, not a horror director, but a director who definitely makes me miserable, which is Derek Cianfrance. He's doing a movie called Roofman. I don't know much about it, but it's starring Channing Tatum, Kirsten Dunst, Ben Mendelsohn. Woo woo! Ben Mendelsohn, love that guy. Peter Dinklage, Uzo Aduba, and Juno Temple, and Lakeith Stanfield. Another stacked cast with a director who I really, really love. But I'm not necessarily in the mood to cry in October, so I'm not going to pick that as my most anticipated. I would also consider Tron Ares. I really liked the visual commitment that Joseph Kosinski brought to the last Tron film. This film, though, is not directed by Joseph Kosinski. It is directed by Joaquin Ronning, who directed the Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales, and Maleficent, Mistress of Evil. So I'm not super excited for that film because I don't love his other films. He did direct Young Woman in the Sea this year with Daisy Ridley, which I did like, but I don't know. To him taking a Tron film, especially starring Jared Leto, who I'm also not the biggest fan of, I couldn't necessarily say that I am the target audience for this movie, though I do expect it will at least be visually interesting, and it'll probably have a really killer score because I believe Daft Punk is back. Actually, no, it's Nine Inch Nails, even cooler. So yeah, Daft Punk did the last one, Nine Inch Nails did this one. I did a quick look up research while I was speaking about that. Very exciting. So yeah, I'm excited for Tron Ares. It's just not quite enough for me to commit to it being my most anticipated of October, but I'm going to be doing something a little out of character for me because I'm a big, challenger of the traditional music biopic. I don't love when every single movie about a musician plays out the very same way with the Wikipedia article of going through every single life event. I'm not the biggest fan of that, but something about this biopic intrigues me a lot, and that is Antoine Fuqua's interpretation of Michael Jackson's life in the biopic Michael, which is starring, I believe, Jafar Jackson, who is Michael Jackson's nephew, or he's the son of Jermaine Jackson, who is Michael Jackson's brother. So yeah, he's his nephew. He's playing his uncle in this film. Now, the thing with Michael Jackson, and it's a similar conversation we had with Elvis when Baz Luhrmann was making Elvis, is that he caters to such a theatrical experience that I do think, if done right, a biopic could be dazzling. It could be a sure spectacle like Elvis was with Baz Luhrmann. But I also think there's also that danger that Michael Jackson's life had a lot of dark corners of it. And I do think in the right hands, I do think it would be really cool to explore some of the flaws of the person that everyone knows as the king of pop, this idol, this sensation, and looking at some of his darker truths. Now, that's something that I didn't think Elvis did very well. I think Elvis more so showed how he was corrupted by his manager, by Tom Hanks's character, and less so showing what he did to Priscilla Presley, which was shown really well in Sofia Coppola's Priscilla. So I do have a little bit of reservation about Michael in the fact that I do see them a world where they shy away from the truth behind Michael Jackson and his darker demons and the things that he did that were not very tasteful. But I also see a world where they totally embrace that and they show that, and it's really intriguing and it's really powerful. I mean, Coleman Domingo is in a supporting role here. I said it a few years ago. I thought he was going to win for Rustin. He never ended up winning for Rustin. I said this year he'd probably win for Sing Sing. He's probably not going to win for Sing Sing because you also have Adrian Brody and Timothée Chalamet in the mix. But this could be the one that finally gets Coleman Domingo the Oscar, playing Michael Jackson's father in a supporting role. I mean, this could get him a supporting actress Oscar, or supporting actor Oscar, I should say. And I would not be surprised if at the end of the year he is an Oscar winner for this film. But it has to stick the landing. It has to be a good biopic. If it is like Bohemian Rhapsody, where it just ticks all the boxes, then I'm not going to be as excited for it. But for Michael Jackson, I feel like they are going to do it right. I feel like they're going to do the spectacle right, and they're going to acknowledge the darker stuff. Because if they don't acknowledge that darker stuff, I think people are going to be pissed off at it. And if they don't make it a big spectacle, I think people are going to be pissed at it. So I really think, to appease everyone and to also just tell the most intriguing story they can, they've got to make it vibrant, they got to make it flamboyant, they got to make it flashy, they got to make it colorful, but they've also got to dive into the darker parts of his life and make a really interesting and flawed portrait of an artist. And I think if they have all those elements, it is going to be one of the year's best. And it's why it is my pick for October with a little bit of trepidation. But of course, if they do stick the landing, it is going to be a film that we are going to be talking about come Oscar time next year. In November, we have a lot of films coming out. On the 7th, we have Begonia, which is the newest Yorgos Lanthimos film, and he is once again reteaming with Emma Stone for the fourth time in a row. Pretty amazing partnership there. Very excited. We're also getting another Predator film by the guy who did Prey, Predator Badlands, directed by Dan Trachtenberg. Another film that I'm super, super excited for. On the 21st, this is going to be most people's most anticipated for November, and it is Wicked for Good. Honestly, I'm very excited for Wicked for Good. The only thing is that Act 2 is much harder to adapt than Act 1 is, and Act 1 I thought was good, but there were some issues, and I do think Act 2 is going to be a harder mountain to climb. If they can successfully nail Part 2, though, I think it's going to be a really great end-of-year treat, and I do think it's going to make a shoot ton of money, but I also have a little bit of trepidation, just because I do understand that the second part of a global phenomenon is harder to do. I mean, look at Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Good, but no one talked about how much better it was than the first one, because it wasn't. The first one was so much better, and I do worry that that is going to be what happens to Wicked for Good, is that everyone's going to be like, it was good, but it wasn't as good as the first one. But if it does sail above expectations, obviously we're going to get Cynthia Erivo singing No Good Deed, which is what I am going to be seated for, and very excited to see. So I'm very excited for Wicked for Good, but it is not my pick for those reasons. And on the 26th, we're getting a Disney sequel. We're getting Zootopia 2, another Ke Huy Quan joint, where he plays, I think, the lead villain, or at least the person that everyone's trying to like chase after. I don't know much of the plot of this one, but I do know that Ke Huy Quan's new snake character is going to be a central focal point to it. So more Ke Huy Quan, the better. I also like the first Zootopia, but these Disney sequels have also been a little hit or miss at times. Moana 2 wasn't my favorite. Frozen 2 wasn't my favorite, but I did also really love Ralph Breaks the Internet. So I have been hit or miss with these Disney sequels, and if this is a hit, it is going to end up being one of my favorite animated films of the year, I'm sure. But my most anticipated film for November comes also on the 7th, alongside Predator Badlands and Begonia, and it is Edgar Wright's The Running Man. Edgar Wright is one of those directors where if he's making a movie, it's ending up on my most anticipated list. It's just how it goes. I mean, he's made so many classics for me at this point, or at least modern classics, where anything he makes, I will be there for. I mean, Baby Driver, I love his film. I love Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. I love his Cornetto trilogy. And I did like, not love, but I did really like Last Night in Soho. I thought it was a solid effort from him, just not quite on the heights of the other ones that he's made. But I do think just him kind of taking this source material of The Running Man and remaking it with his own kind of Edgar Wright sensibility. Obviously, we saw him lean a little bit into horror. This is not a horror book by Stephen King, but it is Stephen King nonetheless, so there's going to be a little bit of an edge there. It's going to be dystopian. I think Edgar Wright just is going to really nail the kind of frantic, kind of chaotic or kinetic energy of it all. It stars Glenn Powell, who is also on a rise. He is becoming one of the movie stars of our time. Also, Katie O'Brien from Love Lies Bleeding is going to be in this. Josh Brolin, Lee Pace, William H. Macy, Sean Hayes. So it's got a great cast. I just think anything that Edgar Wright does, I will be there for. I will be 100% in attendance, ready to get my mind blown by whatever he's putting on screen. I think he's at that point where he's earned a right, where every single film he puts out is going to end up on a most anticipated list. There's just some directors that will just do that. Jordan Peele is going to be a director now that always does that for me. I think Ryan Coogler, as seen earlier in this list, is going to be someone who always does that for me. And I think, once again, Edgar Wright, another director that if he's making a film, it will end up on my most anticipated list, which is exactly what happened. So as much as I'm excited for Wicked and Zootopia, this is the one come November that I'm going to be most excited to see. And then, of course, we end the year in December. We're getting a new SpongeBob movie on the 19th, but I haven't watched SpongeBob in quite some time, so I'm not the most anticipating that one. We're also getting a new Five Nights at Freddy's 2, no comment. On the 25th, we're getting Marty Supreme, the new Safdie film. It's not the Safdie brothers, it's just Josh this time, but I am still excited nonetheless for a new Safdie Bro film, starring Timothée Chalamet as this ping pong player, I believe, but it's also a bit of a crime story. Again, I'm not trying to dive too deep into what the film is, but I'm really excited by it. It is Christmas release, and Timothée Chalamet, between his last few films, has been the king of Christmas. I know Wonka came out a little bit before Christmas, but kind of dominated the conversation around Christmas, and then this year, of course, A Complete Unknown came out on Christmas, so I think he is going to be a household name come Christmas, and I'm really excited for him to once again man lead a film that could potentially get him an Oscar nomination and maybe even an Oscar win. And we'll see what happens with Bob Dylan, but it could be his second Oscar win if he wins 2 in a row. That'd be wild. The Housemaid is also coming out on Christmas Day. That is directed by Paul Feig, one of my favorite under the radar, underrated directors. He made A Simple Favor a few years ago with Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively, which ended up being one of my favorite films of that year. And I do think he's going to bring it once again here. His cast, here it is: Sydney Sweeney, Amanda Seyfried. Done. I'm sold. I'm in. Can't wait for that one. But my most anticipated film for December should be no surprise. If you know me, you know there's another director, not just Edgar Wright, not just Ryan Coogler, that I will always be seated for, and that is James Cameron. And I'm going to pick Avatar: Fire and Ash as my most anticipated film of December. That comes out on the 19th. Obviously, it's an Avatar film, so chances are we probably won't see it till 2028 or 2029. But if everything stays on track, everything stays on schedule, we will get Avatar at the end of this year. And hey, Avatar: The Way of Water, a giant leap in a technical feat. Also just a great film, and a great film I loved. I still love the first film more, but just the fact that both those films are so good and play so well, and hold up so well. I know some people will disagree, but I think they both hold up very well. I cannot wait to see what he has in store for this third installment. I think he has a lot of great ideas brewing. Obviously, we're getting a lot of fire people. It feels like Avatar is kind of crossing over with Avatar: The Last Airbender, because we got our water, now we're getting our fire. Who knows? Maybe the next one will get air, and then we just need earth. I guess Earth was kind of the first one. So yeah, I really like how he's kind of making this kind of an environmental thing, but also just going to be dazzling us with a lot of spectacle. There's not much else I could say. I don't know what the plot's going to be, but I don't need to know. I will be seeing Avatar the very day it opens because I cannot wait for it. It's going to be a spectacular experience. And I know it. I just know it. I mean, if the second one wasn't good, I'd be a little trepidatious, but the second one I thought was amazing. So I'm very excited for Avatar: Fire and Ash, which brings us to the end of the year, but there are still a bunch of other titles I do want to mention, just because they do not have release dates yet, but I am still excited to talk about them and to see them. One of them being Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery. I obviously love the past 2 Knives Out films. Death of a Unicorn, we just saw the trailer for it. It doesn't have an actual release date yet, but it's Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega. They run over a unicorn. The trailer looks funny and quirky, but not quite a film that I saw and was like, oh my God, I gotta see this. But it still looks very interesting. Highest to Lowest, which is the new Spike Lee film, which is an adaptation of Kurosawa's High and Low, looks super intriguing. Happy Gilmore 2 comes out on Netflix this year, probably sometime in the spring if I had to guess. This one was filmed in New Jersey as well, and I know a lot of friends who were extras in it, so it's going to be fun kind of picking them out of the background for all those golf sequences. Obviously, sequels, they're hit or miss, especially Netflix sequels, especially Netflix films that star Adam Sandler, but I do have a lot of hope in this one. Speaking of Adam Sandler, we also have Jay Kelly, the newest Noah Baumbach film, which stars Adam Sandler and George Clooney. Hey, if there was ever a year to give Adam Sandler his best Oscar actor nomination, it's this year. Make it happen. Noah Baumbach, I have faith in you. We also have Warfare, which is the next war film directed by Alex Garland. He just did, obviously, the film Civil War, so I'm excited to see yet another war film from Alex Garland by A24. The Way of the Wind, which is Terrence Malick's next film. That's a film I don't know if it's actually going to come out, but if it does, that's going to be super exciting. Some other directors that have works coming out this year. Kelly Reichardt has a new film called The Mastermind. Park Chan-wook has a new film called No Other Choice. Lynn Ramsey, Die My Love. Wes Anderson has The Phoenician Scheme. Ari Aster's A Western, Eddington, is supposedly coming out this year. We have another film from Julia Ducournau called Alpha coming out this year, I believe. She's the one who did Titan and Raw, 2 of my favorite horror films the last few years. Titan is my favorite horror film, but I don't know if it's 100% coming out this year, so I didn't want to give a spot to it on the list if I wasn't 100% certain. Luca Guadagnino also supposedly has a new film coming out this year called After the Hunt. David Lowery has Mother Mary coming out this year, I believe, starring, I think, Anne Hathaway in the leading role. Don't quote me on that. I'm kind of remembering that in my very subconscious memory. The Actor, which, speaking of subconscious memory, is all about a guy who apparently gets in a bad accident and can't remember anything about his life, only to piece it all back together, find his way to his truth. It almost has a Memento vibe to it. Stars Andre Holland. Sounds very, very good. But I did pick 3 movies that I'm very excited for, that aren't necessarily locked in that they have a release date, but they are definitely coming out in 2025. One of them was on my list last year, and that is Freaky Tales. This is the new anthology film directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. If you know me, I'm a huge Anna Boden, Ryan Fleck fanboy. I love their film Sugar. It is my favorite sports film of all time. I also love Mississippi Grind. I do really like Captain Marvel. I think it's underrated. So they are two of my favorite directors, and they made this film. It premiered at Sundance. It got some good buzz, but I also think a lot of their films are a little hit or miss. Some of their films are more divisive. So I'm not necessarily going to take the Sundance buzz as gospel, because I know Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck very personally in my heart. I don't actually know them personally, but I know that their films have a tendency to be a little alienating for audiences at times. So I understand that they might not be getting the best reviews, but I'm glad it's coming out this year. They did confirm it will find its way to theaters this year. So I'm very excited to see that one. Another one I'm super excited for is Frankenstein, Guillermo del Toro, which I didn't think was coming out this year, but it is. It's coming out on Netflix at the end of the year. Probably, I would assume, in October, November, maybe even December, a Christmas release, but there's no certainty what date it will be coming out in yet. So I am not necessarily locking it in for one of the months, but I am going to lock it in here as part of my list because I'm just so intrigued by the idea of Guillermo del Toro doing Frankenstein. That being said, I didn't really love his Pinocchio, so I don't necessarily know if this is going to be another slam dunk hit, especially also because it's going straight to Netflix. It's not getting a theatrical release, which I think is a shame. But I do hope that he just, by the nature of being Guillermo del Toro, is going to create something really fascinating, really spectacular. I mean, Shape of Water was a great adaptation of Creature of the Black Lagoon, and I think if he is able to take that same kind of universal monster property and bring it to the big screen, I think it's going to be super successful. And look, I already have Wolfman, and I have The Bride of Frankenstein on here, so why not add Frankenstein to the mix and put 3 Universal monsters on my list for 2025? And of course, my final film that I'm putting on my list is one that I'm super excited for, which comes from the director of the Best Picture winner of a few years ago, Chloe Zhao. It is Hamnet. And Hamnet, if you don't know what Hamnet is, it was a book that came out a few years ago, in 2020, I believe, by Maggie O'Farrell, and it told the story of Shakespeare and his wife and their son, Hamnet, and basically going through the grieving process of the death of their 11-year-old son, Hamnet. It is deep, it is dark, it is a book that will make you sob and cry, but there's a few reasons why I'm putting it on my best of or most anticipated list for this year, because not only is it a great book, but Chloe Zhao is one of my favorite new directors as well. I loved Eternals. I massively adored Nomadland. I thought she should have definitely won that Oscar. She did. I was very happy for her. She made history in doing so. But I also love the idea that it's, diving into Shakespeare without necessarily being an adaptation of a Shakespeare play. It's going to kind of deal with his life and him as the human being. And I know we kind of got that a little bit with Shakespeare in Love, but Shakespeare in Love was kind of this more fantastical idea of like, what if Shakespeare's actual love story modeled one of his stories, like Romeo and Juliet, and it kind of became this kind of cheeky little wink meta kind of commentary on Shakespeare's works, but it was still very light, very romantic, whereas this one is dark, it's historical, it's dreary, it's depressing, but also I find such fascination in Shakespeare's works, and I love seeing, works told about authors who kind of use their life experiences and channeled it in their work. And because Shakespeare existed centuries and centuries ago, it's hard to get that actual documentation of what Shakespeare was like and what his life was like, but we can see all of his ethos and his mindset through his works. And I think this is going to be a great experiment to kind of show the human behind the artist. And I think that's going to be really fascinating. Paul Mescal is going to be playing Shakespeare. Jesse Buckley is going to be playing his wife, Agnes. I think that cast is just going to be so fantastic. And looking at the producers, Steven Spielberg is a producer on this. This is being produced by Amblin. Also, Sam Mendes is attached to produce this. The screenplay is being written by Chloe Zhao and by the writer of the book, Maggie O'Farrell. So if you are a fan of this book, you can understand why I'm hyped for this movie. But just as a Shakespeare nerd, as someone who just loves stories about authors and their backstories in writing what they wrote, I mean, I look at The Hours, the movie starring Nicole Kidman about Virginia Woolf, and trying to understand who Virginia Woolf was by that film and kind of showing these different decades and channeling through time. If this comes out this year, which I do think it's still slated to come out this year, it's going to be distributed by Focus Features in the US and Universal internationally. If it comes out this year, I have no doubt that it is going to be a film that is just going to take the world by storm. The cinematographer of it is also the same cinematographer who did films like Ida, Cold War, The Zone of Interest, Loving Vincent. I mean, so many amazingly shot films, including another Jesse Buckley film, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. So all of the aspects of this film, all the elements of this film are just tailor-made for me. I cannot wait to sob with my tissues in hand and just weeping into my tissues, blowing every amount of snot out of my nose after following this very sad but very, very brilliant work called Hamnet. So if you don't know about Hamnet, read the book. It might be a good primer before you go into a movie as depressing and sad as this. But I mean, a story about Shakespeare and his wife grieving their 11-year-old son Hamnet, and then like seeing how that affects his life as a writer. Genius. It's genius. Chloe Zhao, cannot wait. Okay, so those are all the films that I'm excited for in 2025. I picked 3: Frankenstein, Freaky Tales, and Hamnet, as well as the 12 other films I talked about for the different months corresponding throughout the year. So now it's time to rank all these films by excitement. Here we go. Starting it off at number 15, I'm going to put Ballerina. I do have a little bit of worry that it's just going to kind of feel like another spinoff of any other IP, but I think the fact that it is a John Wick spinoff makes it promising. I just hope they don't make it too Keanu Reeves focused. I hope he's merely a cameo and they allow it to be its own thing, its own story. At 14, we do have Michael. Again, I do have a little fear that this is going to become a bit of a glossy kind of ignore the dark stuff type biopic, but if it stays true to telling the authentic story of Michael Jackson, including all the flair and visual spectacular nature of his performances, then I think this could be a real killer biopic. At 13 and 12, we're going to do the double feature of Frankenstein monsters. We're going to start it at number 13 with Frankenstein, and then at number 12, we'll put The Bride. Again, we've seen so many different versions of Frankenstein and The Bride of Frankenstein that I don't know if these are going to be the essential versions, but just considering who's attached to each of them has me super excited. At 11, right outside the top 10, we do have Freaky Tales. This is one I was super excited for last year. The buzz out of Sundance wasn't huge, but I think it was enough to get me excited for it, especially being a Bowden and Fleck fan. But it does stay right outside the top 10 because at number 10, we're putting The Running Man from Edgar Wright. Again, every time Edgar Wright has a film, we're putting it on the list no matter what. At number 9, Mickey 17. So excited to see how Bong Joon-ho follows up his last film. But the fact that it is getting such an early release date makes me a little worried that it might be a little alienating and not much of a crowd pleaser like Parasite was. At number 8, smack dab in the middle is going to be The Battle of Batkin Cross. I don't know much about it, which is why it's staying this low on the list. At number 7, Superman. I have a lot of faith in this, but it also has a lot of stakes attached to it. And I am a little worried that if it doesn't succeed, it is going to sink DC as we know it, but I do have faith James Gunn's going to stick the landing. At number 6, I can't believe it's this low, but I'm putting Paddington in Peru. The only reason it's this low is because I've heard some buzz about it. People say it's good, just not as good as Paddington 2, which is what I assumed and expected. I think the fact that just so many other films look so surprising and really caught me off guard when I was looking through this list, that's how Paddington in Peru fell all the way to number 6, but let's be honest, I will be there opening night. Can't wait for it. At number 5, we have Wolfman. Ooh, this comes out this month. I know it's January and a lot of shit gets dumped in January, but I have faith that Wolfman is not going to be one of those crappy January horror films. I think it's going to be great. It was supposed to come out this past year. It got pushed to 2025. So I hope that's just a sign that they wanted more time to make it perfect and really give it a strong debut in January rather than just saying it was not good. Let's dump it in January. But if it is one that they dump in January, then so be it. At number 4, it is Sinners, the new Ryan Coogler film. This looks fantastic. I'm so excited for this one. At number 3, the one I just talked about, Hamnet. This one is going to destroy my emotions. I know it. But in my top 2, I have to go with the biggest, boldest spectacles of the year that I can't wait for. Number 2 is going to be Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. I cannot wait for that film to see how they follow up the Dead Reckoning story and how they conclude that arc and maybe conclude the series at large. And then at number 1, I have no doubt I will be blown away by it. Even if it's not the best story or it doesn't have the best performances, it's going to be a cultural phenomenon. I just know it. The first 2 were, let's put Avatar, Fire and Ash there at the number 1 spot. I don't care. It's my list. I'm excited for Avatar most of all. But really, any of those 15 films, I will be there as soon as I can to see them because they are all piquing my interest. I mean, look at how many different varieties of films we have. We have 3 Universal horror monsters. We have a new horror film by Ryan Coogler. We have a drama by Chloe Zhao. We have a Mission Impossible film, an Avatar film, a John Wick film. We have a remake of The Running Man from Edgar Wright. We have a new Bong Joon-ho, a new Paul Thomas Anderson, and we have freaking Superman. sign me up. What a great year it's going to be. I hope. I cannot wait to see all these films and let you know what I thought of them in podcast or in video form. If you're not following the podcast, go follow the Dyl Pickle Podcast. If you're not subscribed here on the YouTube, please subscribe. A lot of cool things coming in 2025, some channel changes, but all changes that are going to be very exciting for the future of the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. Thank you so much for listening to this video, and let me know what you're most anticipating of the list down in the comments below. If I missed anything, if there are any films that are not on my radar, put them on my radar. Let me know in the comments below, and I will be sure to check them out as well. And check out my Letterboxd if you want to see my full extended top 30 most anticipated films of the year. Otherwise, that's it for me. Thank you so much. Check out my New York Film Fest ranking video that I did earlier today, and then stay tuned tomorrow. I'm going to be doing a video recapping the Golden Globes and giving my final round of Oscar predictions before my final Oscar nomination predictions in just a couple weeks when they announce the nominees. And as always, stay tuned for the Pickle Awards in just a few months, where I will do my final wrap-up of 2024 and what I thought of the films of 2024. But now we're looking ahead, 2025. Hope it's a great year. Happy New Year. Hope you all had a very safe and happy holiday. And we'll see you tomorrow for some Oscar predictions after Globes and BAFTA long lists and Oscar short lists and all that stuff. So enjoy the Golden Globes tonight if you're watching, and stay tuned for a great year of cinema to come. Thank you so much.